Schön und hässlich sah ich nie einen Tag.
Kommt, Geister, die ihr lauscht auf Mordgedanken. Heil dir, dem künftigen König.
Duncan kommt heute Abend noch. Wenn's uns misslänge.
Es misslingt uns nicht.
Ich wage alles, was dem Manne ziemt. Wer mehr wagt, der ist keiner.
Das sind die wahren Bilder deiner Furcht. Macbeth wird nie besiegt.
Nur von Skorpionen voll ist mein Gemüt.
Geschehen ist, was geschehen.
Flieh! Ich bin so tief in Blut gestiegen.
Heil dir, Macbeth, dir künftigem König. Ich empfinde nun das Künftige. Heil dir, künftiger König.
Mein teures Leben. Duncan kommt heute noch.
Unschuldig sei dein Blick, doch birgt die Schlange im Innern. Heil dir, Macbeth, dir künftigem König.
Mord! Mord! Flieh! Von Skorpionen voll ist mein Gemüt.
Geschehen ist, was geschehen.
Leben ist nur ein wandelndes Schattenbild. Ehre, Liebe, Freunde, stattdessen Flüche.
Heil dir, Macbeth, dir künftigem König.
Mit Michael Fassbender und Marion Cotillard in den Hauptrollen feiert Shakespeares Macbeth eine Wiederauferstehung auf der Kinoleinwand. Der australische Regisseur Justin Kurzel wagte sich an die Verfilmung des berühmten Schottenepos um den legendären Königsmörder.
Wir wollten dem Text gerecht werden, so wie bei jedem Drehbuch. Aber das ist natürlich Shakespeare. Er schrieb meisterhaft.
Mein teures Leben. Duncan kommt heute noch.
Unschuldig sei dein Blick, doch birgt die Schlange im Innern.
Sie dürsten beide nicht nur nach Macht, sondern einem Wandel. Etwas Größerem als ihr Leben.
Heil dir, Macbeth, dir künftigem König.
Justin und ich entschieden sehr früh, dass wir Macbeth als jemanden mit einer posttraumatischen Belastungsstörung sehen. Er hat also bereits Halluzinationen und gewisse Anzeichen einer Psychose.
Sag mir, Gemahl, was bist du so allein?
Verwundet ward die Schlange, nicht getötet.
Es geht um Menschen, die sich auf eine sehr clevere Weise gegenseitig manipulieren. Alles gesagt hat einen Subtext. Das macht Macbeth so interessant.
Lass gut sein, mein liebster Mann. Die Runzeln glätte weg. Sei froh. Und munter heute mit deinen Gästen.
Ich hätte Macbeth nicht ohne Michael gemacht. Er war mit der Grund, diesen Film überhaupt zu machen. Das wird ihm jetzt peinlich sein. Aber ich halte ihn definitiv für einen der besten Schauspieler seiner Generation.
Auch wenn seine Figur unheimlich komplex ist, zeichnet sein Spiel eine Schlichtheit aus, die absolut beeindruckend ist.
Wir haben bewusst viel draußen gedreht. Man spürt den Aufwand und welche Rolle die Kulisse spielt. Das waren große Herausforderungen. Aber Originalschauplätze erden den Film und lassen ihn realistisch wirken. Sie lassen einen spüren, wie die Landschaft und die Worte, die Taten miteinander verbunden sind.
Von Skorpionen voll ist mein Gemüt.
Geschehen ist, was geschehen.
Ich glaube, wir sind den Stoff sehr geradlinig angegangen. Wir haben nie gegen die Lyrik gearbeitet oder die Lyrik missachtet.
Leben ist nur ein wandelndes Schattenbild. Ehre, Liebe, Freunde. Stattdessen Flüche.
Es ist ein herrliches Kunstwerk, erschaffen von einem großen Künstler. Und ich bin stolz, ein Teil davon zu sein.
Kritiker überschlagen sich bereits mit Lobeshymnen auf Kurzells packende und bildgewaltige Macbeth-Verfilmung. Sie schafft es, Shakespeare gerecht zu werden und doch modern zu sein. Und hat mit Michael Fassbender einen heißen Oscar-Kandidaten. Macbeth, ab 29. Oktober im Kino.
Die Geister, welche allirdisch walten kennen, haben's mir prophezeit. Sei kühn, Macbeth! Kein Mann vom Weib geboren soll je dir was anhaben!
It's an amazing piece and you get one chance at it.
I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't Michael. I mean, Michael's one of the greatest actors of his generation.
He's very creative, he's very inventive, and I think what he did with this character is so brilliant.
When you're watching him play this role, it feels very real. I think you actually get into the mind of the man.
Von Skorpionen voll ist mein Gemüt.
Usually Macbeth is about two characters wanting more and the greed that comes with that. And I thought it'd be interesting to flip it. So Macbeth is a product of war and that then plays into his ambitions to become king.
We were going to treat Macbeth as a character who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. That really brought a whole clarity and a direction.
The idea that the prophecy and the ambition of it is somehow a way of replacing a kind of trauma or a grief.
There's this complexity about the character, but there's this simplicity about his performance.
I wasn't trying to impose my own version. I was just trying to keep it true.
Michael's a very authentic actor. He sets the bar.
He owns the character so much. I think it'll be difficult for people not to picture Michael's face when they think of Macbeth.
Und ich empfinde nun das Künftige im Jetzt. Heil dir, künftiger König.
Michael and I were really excited and keen on Marion being part of the film. It was like a dream for her to play Lady Macbeth.
When I got the offer, I was very surprised because I'm French. But I couldn't miss this opportunity. I had no doubt about saying yes.
Geschehen ist, was geschehen.
Justin thought it was kind of interesting to have this foreign flavor to Lady Macbeth.
It allowed us to really, at the center of the story, put a character that had an otherness, and it allowed us to tell, I think, a little bit more complex story for the Lady Macbeth character.
We suggest a loss within their lives in terms of potentially a child. Ambition becomes a way of trying to fill a void. That became really interesting.
Unschuldig sei dein Blick, doch birgt die Schlange im Innern.
She's desperate for forgetting what happened before and just looking ahead and creating their own destiny. And I thought it was very interesting to explore and to create this struggle inside of her.
You can have good people that do terrible things. You'll have great empathy for Lady Macbeth.
And it adds just a different layer to the entire project. She's really just brilliant.
Marion just put everything into it and did an extraordinary job.
I felt a very strong connection with Lady Macbeth. And when I talked to Justin about his vision, it perfectly matched the vision that I had when I read it the first time.
What has been very strong in this version of Macbeth is its sense of community and its sense of the wider world that is existing around these lead characters. And I think what's been really important to us is to make sure that the community is felt, that the idea that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth existed within a world and that their actions affected that world and they were a product of that world themselves. So I think that's been the most important thing for us, is to not just focus in on what would be the actors on stage in a normal adaptation, but also to look at the wider world that existed and how these acts, this murderous acts, actually affected a community rather than just our lead characters. The Lady Macbeth and Macbeth relationship has a lot to it, and I think can be explored in many different ways. What is important about our version of film, or what we loved about telling this story, was the idea of exploring how Lady Macbeth has to cope with a husband who's returned from war and is damaged by that war, and how the man that she saw go off to war months or years before had changed by the experiences on the battlefield. And by doing that, and by shifting a few things in terms of the sort of greater world that Lady Macbeth lives in, I think that it sort of offers a slightly more complex picture than the idea of the evil wife that leads her husband to kill. Once we had Michael, who has continued to show how fantastic an actor he has been over his recent roles, we had such a solid foundation by which to attract other people to the project. And then it was wonderful that Justin Cazelle responded so well to the script, and through that then to go to Marion Cotillard and to be in the situation that we are now. It was definitely a process by which it was the perfect actors coming into this world, and the way in which they've been playing both roles feels very, very organic and like they were designed to join us on this sort of trip. The incredible thing about Michael's performance is that when you're watching him play this role, it feels very real, it feels very grounded. It's not of a place of theatricality. I think you actually get into the mind of the man. And what's so special about that is that it's almost, it's seeing the madness unfold, and you're sort of watching it, and you know you have no control or no way to help him. So you're seeing and knowing the events that are going to unfold, and it feels surprising and new. It allowed us to really, at the centre of the story, put a character that had an otherness as part of the story. So the idea of not taking a couple that, I guess, that were the traditional either English or Scottish actors, but to actually bring together a sense of slight separation for Lady Macbeth, that she exists in this community, but she is slightly different and feels that she is slightly different, and her agenda is slightly different to the other women that live in Inverness, allowed us to tell, I think, a little bit more complex story for the Lady Macbeth character. And I think all of that, together with her incredible performance, will really be a surprise for people, and I think be a really new, fresh way of looking at Lady Macbeth as a role.
I just thought it was beautiful, really. I mean, I've always enjoyed Shakespeare, but this one in particular, I just enjoyed. It was just incredibly dark and raw, and you know, I just really kind of found myself drawn to that part of it really. I wanted to do something that was a little bit dark and gritty, but something that had meaning and purpose. And of course, you know, it's such an elevated project. And there's just such great people in it, really lovely people, that to have the opportunity to be part of it is such a huge honor for a young actor like me. I'm really thrilled to have been part of it.
The research that I kind of did was heavily based on, I guess, the real Macbeth and, you know, kind of the times in the 11th century and what that was, and I guess how kind of brutal that landscape and world was. And it reminded me a lot of a Western. It reminded me kind of, I don't know, a landscape and an atmosphere that felt much more dangerous than probably what I'd seen in sort of past productions of Macbeth. And then I guess the kind of shadow of war and being able to bring that to screen cinematically, and how Macbeth responds to war or is a product of war, and how that then plays into his ambitions to become king. There's something about Macbeth where it's characters manipulating each other that, I mean, at times I was kind of, you know, watching the verse between Marion and Michael, and also I think Michael and Paddy, that feels kind of like a scene out of Goodfellas. You know, it's kind of characters trying to, you know, manipulate each other in a very, very clever and conniving way, and there's a sort of subtext to all that that is unspoken. And it's really interesting in Macbeth in that there is a kind of secrecy and a kind of tension that kind of happens within the verse that is almost conversational, as opposed to, you know, the kind of artifice of speaking your thoughts continuously. And I think that's very unique to the writing of Macbeth, and why I think it stands out from many of Shakespeare's other plays. I've thought about it, you know, quite a long time watching the play over the years. The idea of two characters trying to fill a void and trying to fill a kind of hole, and whether that's inspired by grief or trauma or whatever, that the idea that the prophecy and the ambition of it is somehow a way of replacing a kind of tragedy. So the sense of Macbeth obviously being a kind of weary soldier suffering from, or the suggestions of kind of post-trauma, we're also kind of suggesting a loss within their lives in terms of potentially a child. That became kind of really interesting in terms of somehow the prophecy and the killing of the king liberating these two characters in terms of them being able to move forward as people and also as a couple. That was a really deliberate thing to shoot a lot of this stuff outside. I mean, I'm doing ADR today, and the challenges of kind of post-sound when you're shooting in environments where you're getting gusts of wind that are blowing off your set, you know, and at the same time Michael's trying to do some very famous verse. You know, there's some pretty serious challenges in that, but what it brings is a kind of groundedness and a reality and a sense of the landscape being connected to the words and to the performance, which I think, you know, you can really feel in the film. Is I guess kind of gives it a I don't know, an earthiness that I think is quite unique to the verse, but also to the storytelling. You can feel the effort, hopefully, in the film, and you can feel how the landscape plays an integral role, because I think nature is a huge element in Macbeth. I think that the idea that there is the possibility of spirits and the possibility that the landscape is so much greater than we could ever be, and that somehow it kind of orientates and dictates the human spirit and destiny. I think, which is what's playing in the play so much, to be able to put that on screen and have a kind of dialogue with that, it's amazing. I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't Michael. I mean, Michael was kind of really kind of part of the whole reason to do it. You know, I'd met Michael after I'd finished my first film, and he's someone, you know, I think he's you'll get embarrassed, but I do think he's one of the greatest actors of his generation by far. You know, and he was an artist that I desperately kind of wanted to collaborate with. So, you know, when Ian brought me the script and said, you know, Macbeth, and I was like, well, you know, yeah. And then he said, you know, with Michael, and I was just like, yes. Michael and I were really excited and keen on Marion being part of the film. She was a huge, I mean, it was like a dream for her to play Lady Macbeth, and she never ever thought that she would get the opportunity to do that. So I think it was something that she couldn't say no to. But having said that, you know, she was sort of starting from a point that was, you know, that I mean, you know, there was a massive mountain in front of her. But, you know, I mean, both Michael and Marion in the time that they've been working on it just put everything into it and did an extraordinary job in getting up to speed. To be able to work with Marion and bring these two together and be on set. Like, I mean, I remember the last sort of scene we had with Michael and Marion. It was, you know, it was a really, really kind of melancholy moment of, wow, this is the last time I'll get to be with these two in a room doing Macbeth. You know, is pretty extraordinary. My favourite part of the whole process is shooting and between action and cut, because I think that is where you can't plan to a point. You know, I think it's where, in terms of what's going to happen there and then, and how two actors are going to respond and react to each other, I think that's like jazz. You know, it's just it's going to happen there and then, and that's it, on that Tuesday, in that afternoon, in that rain, right there and then, with everyone being tired or not, or happy or whatever. The dynamics happen right there in that moment, and I think that's really, really exciting, and I think you have to kind of embrace it, especially doing something like Shakespeare.
I knew that one day I would play Lady Macbeth, but I thought it would be in French and on stage. I talked to Justin, and before I met with him, I talked to him on the phone, and I asked him, what would you get a French actress? And he thought it was kind of interesting to have this foreign flavor to Lady Macbeth. I couldn't miss this opportunity to play Lady Macbeth in English with the Shakespeare language. That was, I had no doubt about saying yes. It's a big part, and the history of this part, the greatest actresses who played it before, it's kind of a heavy weight. And but then I saw Justin's first movie, Snowtown Murders, and I knew that he would do something very special. He always had ideas, and when I was on set, I never knew what would happen in a scene. That's very exciting, because I love to be surprised, and with him, I was surprised every day. There's this complexity about the character, but there's this simplicity about his performance that is absolutely amazing. They're thirsty of not only power, but a change, something bigger than their lives. They're grieving. They're mourning. And they're desperate for a new life. They're desperate for forgetting what happened before and just looking ahead and creating their own destiny. I mean, for me, it was not just to find the right accent and find the rhythm and the energy of the text, but it was really like going deep into Shakespeare's world and what he wanted to tell. And all together, all the actors, we prepared and we worked for, I think it was a month and a half, which was nothing, honestly. But it really created a very unique and special energy. I remember when I was a kid, I was fascinated each time I would see a picture of this country, but I never went there. But it was the top one country on my list of most wanted country to visit. And the first time I went there was actually with the movie. It's a magnificent piece of art made by a great artist, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
It's an amazing piece, and you get one chance at it, you know. I mean, and then it's going to be down on film, and that's it. So I just tried to be as well prepared as I could be going into it, and like on every job then, as Justin was saying, you know, each day you just try and make sure that you've uncovered all the stones and not left anything sort of wanting at the end of the day, as much as you can, to have that philosophy every day. I think everything we approached with simplicity. You know, I don't think we ever tried to work against the verse. No. Or to sort of disregard the verse. We just tried to keep everything simple and tangible, and you know, the idea that, you know, Justin had from the beginning was a lot more intimate, perhaps, with the text than maybe some of the more traditional examples would be. But it was always to be just, you know, truthful to the text, really, as any script you would approach. But of course, you know, this is Shakespeare. It's pretty amazing writing. Justin, I think, sort of discovered very early on that we were going to treat Macbeth as a character who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And so already he's having hallucinations, and there's a certain element of psychosis there, which runs right through to the banquet scene where, you know, he says himself, you know, if anybody knows me, they know that I have these sort of strange fits. So that obviously was something that was part of the man before we come to him in the play. And I thought that was a really helpful key into finding him, you know, and finding that sort of what is reality and what's in his head. There's an awareness, you know, because like once you start like a line like, is this a dagger I see before me? It's hard not to hear all the other actors, all the other times that I've seen it sort of come up and sort of be there in your sort of, you know, internal radio or whatever's going on. So trying to find, you know, some sort of freshness, I suppose, is inevitable. But then also not to dwell on it too much, because, you know, the line then doesn't have to sort of become a labored line, you know. It has to sort of just be like any of the other lines, but it is that recognizable line. So it's all those things, you know, trying to get to a place where you can enjoy it and allow it to sort of dictate to you rather than you trying to sort of necessarily impose anything on it. from rehearsal period on, his insight into the piece, and the clearness of what we were looking for in each scene, in each section, really helped so much and brought a real clarity to each beat and each section that we were approaching in a way that I couldn't, you know, I was kind of in the fog with a lot of it. It was just great to see him on set because I was like, there is somebody doing what they were put here to do. And you know, I just felt a great trust in him. And that's the essential thing that an actor needs to feel coming to work each day, is a trust to be able to go to places and to look, you know, to make a fool of yourself and to, you know, feel like you're in a safe place to do that, and somebody who's keeping an eye out for you. And I know Marion felt exactly the same.
Banquo the Bear, we called him. I mean, he's just a fiercely loyal guy, you know, and seemingly incorruptible, and you know, and that has a very huge moral conflict as he sees his friend unravel, and he's kind of less troubled seemingly by the prophecy than Macbeth is, but when he starts to see the change in his friend, you know, it's when he has to kind of question what his motives are in all of this.